I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to Watchdog.com. With us, a friend of mine and a real patriot. He runs the popular radio show Operation Freedom at DaveJanda.com. Kind of gave it away. Let me just bring on Dr. Dave Janda, a retired orthopedic surgeon. We want to talk about the Obama ruling. We want to talk about the court cases coming up, the prosecutions of these weasels that try to take Trump down, Syria. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. So let's start with, there's some things out there right now which I've tried to beat down that it just doesn't make sense to me that, Huber's a fraud, and the Inspector General report, Horowitz, he's a fraud, that these guys are frauds and they're just head fakes. And I don't think that's true. What do your sources say about this?
Well, Greg, I'd like to thank you for having me back on your platform. I enjoy being with you. You're a good friend, and I enjoy the audience and the feedback I get from your audience. Greg, I can understand people being very, very upset about where we are, in a sense that we keep hearing, and you've put forward information, I've put forward information, that there's a process ongoing, but people get very frustrated, as do both you and I, that we're not seeing people in orange jumpsuits with handcuffs on being perp walked, high-profile individuals. And when that frustration then starts to lead into calling certain people part of the problem, not part of the solution, the latest being some information that was put out or some hypotheses put out, some impressions put out by several folks in the print media and also over the internet, in particular about Huber and about who is the prosecutor from Utah who Sessions had brought in to oversee two things, Greg. That is the email investigation and how the FBI and the Department of Justice handled that of Hillary Clinton. And the other directive given to Huber when he was brought in was to investigate how the Justice Department under Obama, as well as the FBI, got embroiled and blew up this mushroom cloud of potential Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. Those were the two directives given Huber. Horowitz, who was a Department of Justice official, the Inspector General, who was appointed under the Obama administration. And there are people who say, well, Huber was also appointed under Obama. So really, these are both sheep in wolf's clothing, if you will, or wolves in sheep's clothing, I should say, that are part of the globalist syndicate, and they're frauds. The investigations are fake. Well, a couple things on that. I have to rely on the people that I've known for many years. As you know, I first got involved with healthcare policy at a national level, federal level, under the Reagan administration at the tail end of Ronald Reagan's administration. And since then, I had done some healthcare policy work. Not that they listened, Reagan did, because I was working with C. Everett Koop at the time and Jack Kemp and several others from the domestic policy side. But then I continued to try to help with healthcare policy, not that Bush 1 or Clinton or Bush 2 listened, and forget about Obama. He just sicked the IRS on me for outing the fact that Obamacare was two parts and it would lead to healthcare that was unavailable, unaffordable, and not quality oriented. We'll get to that later. But the point is, I've developed these contacts through my work in healthcare policy in a large number of federal agencies and a large number of federal departments because, for example, Treasury Department would be interested in healthcare policy. They get in touch with me, and through my work with the Treasury Department at the time, the Secret Service was under them, so I get to know some Secret Service people and then say, hey, the FBI has some questions on healthcare policy issues, and I get to know some folks at the FBI and the training with the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies and the like. So over the past 30 years, I've developed this network of folks I consider to be freedom fighters behind the curtain that have been fighting the deep state and if you will, the criminal banking syndicate, the globalists, if you will. And there's been this civil war that's been ongoing in our government for decades. It's actually escalated since the inauguration or election inauguration of Donald Trump. So when I pushed this information in front of my contacts in a number of different departments, a number of different agencies, about Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, about Huber, this prosecutor that Sessions brought on board to monitor, again, Greg, not to be repetitious, but this is very important because this goes at the crux of the criticism of Huber. He was directed to look at the email investigation of the FBI and the Department of Justice of Hillary Clinton and her emails and her servers. And in addition to that, he was directed to look at how this all blew up about Russian collusion with the Trump campaign and the Department of Justice under Obama and the FBI.
And hold on, let me just get in here with it. They're talking about the Uranium One deal, which is a giant treasonous fraud. But that's a whole other case with Dennis Campbell. They're talking about the Clinton Foundation. That's a whole fraud. That's not a charity. That's a whole nother case. That's a whole fraud. You're talking about the arming the rebels. That's a whole nother treasonous fraud. The rebels, the ISIS and Al Qaeda. Flying plane loads. That's another case. Flying plane loads of pallets of C-130s of cash into Iran for a deal that was never signed. That's yet another huge case. You have multiple huge cases, not just one case. So you're talking about a very narrow thing that Huber was tasked to do. Keep going. Your sources say.
And they say that Huber and Horowitz are not fighting on the globalist side, period. And that's universal across my contacts. And these are contacts that I know for many years, based on the information and results that I've personally seen, that these folks have been fighting against the deep state for many years. So again, they've never pointed to somebody and say, this person is okay, when in fact they're not. And I believe in these two instances, Horowitz and Huber, I don't think they're wrong. Here's why I say this, Greg. Let's go back to January of 2018. A year ago. Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, was going to present information on January 15th to Congress, some draft reports, about the problems in the Obama Department of Justice and FBI and related agencies. On January 12th, and Paul Sperry reported this, and I also believe Chad Pergram, who is a producer for Fox, who I believe is one of the best correspondents on Capitol Hill, in spite of Fox. He presented information that actually Horowitz submitted that information on January 12th. It was several days after that all of a sudden Devin Nunes stepped forward into the spotlight and said, based on information we've received, here are the problems that have occurred in the Department of Justice and the Department of Justice and the FBI. That just wasn't coincidence, I was told at the time. That Nunes had the power to come forward based on the information that Horowitz had presented. And let's face it, if it wasn't for Horowitz, we would not know about the text messages between Strzok and Page.
About the media leak strategy.
Right, the media leaks.
The media leak strategy. I mean, they involve the press. This is why the press isn't covering it. We brought this up on your show, Operation Freedom. And it's my contention that the reason why there's a blackout is because they were part of the treason, the sedition, the crime. They were part of the leak strategy. And Strzok is a number 2 in the FBI in counterintelligence. He's the deputy. He's not a small player. And Lisa Page is a high-ranking attorney. Go ahead.
Greg, since Horowitz has been on the scene, there have been 26 high-level Department of Justice, FBI officials that have either been fired, they have resigned, they have been put in other offices because they're under internal investigation based on their actions. Greg, that's never happened in our country's history.
That's right. It's huge. That's just this.
And again, this is related to what, let's take something current that people might say, well, that was months ago. That's not now. Okay. What came out last week, Greg?
The Clinton Foundation is not.
There were 19,000 text messages between Strzok and Page that went missing, right? And that were deleted by Mueller's team. And Greg, who found them and presented them to saying, oh, no, 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 we got them back? It was the Inspector General's office. Horowitz.
Yeah.
So if Horowitz is in the bag, why in the world are there 26 officials that have, and remember his testimony in front of Congress, he spoke about recommending people for prosecution, correct?
Oh, yeah.
So if he's part of the problem, why is he recommending McCabe be prosecuted? Why is casting aspersions upon Comey? I mean, and remember, Horowitz has another report coming out.
Yeah, on the fraudulent documents used for FISA.
Right. Now with Huber, here's where people got wound up about Huber. On December 5th, he was going to testify along with several other folks in front of the government oversight or the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And that testimony was canceled because of the pomp and circumstance for the burial and memorial service of the globalist George H.W. Bush.
Yeah, I want to talk about the postcards later, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
The letters.
So then it gets moved to the 13th, a week and a day later.
Yeah.
Okay. And everybody, Huber's going to testify. Huber's going to testify. Okay. And my question at the time was, what's he going to testify about? Because the hearing is supposed to be about the Clinton Foundation, and he was tasked with the Hillary Clinton emails, specifically that, and how the FBI and the Department of Justice investigated those, and he was tasked with the with how the Russian collusion with the Trump campaign story, blew up. So at the time, I was saying, what's he going to talk about with the foundation? Because that's a separate investigation, as is, as you mentioned, the Benghazi investigation, as well as the Iran deal investigation. What happened there? I mean, these are all separate,
and they're huge.
Okay, so I'm thinking, well, what the heck is Huber going to say? But I believe that was misdirection, and here's why. Because I believe you watched the hearing. I watched it live, Greg. And I was stunned at the amount of information that was presented by the two what are called whistleblowers, Moynihan and Doyle. And I believe what happened was they used Huber as a distraction.
They never intended him to testify.
Part of the art of war is deception.
Yeah.
Right?
They never intended for Huber to testify. They always intended to have
and then it came out at the hearing why Huber didn't testify. And I believe it was Mark Meadows, the chairman of that committee, who said, and it was only after Moynihan and Doyle dropped an enormous, it was a nuclear bomb. Oh. And what they said, they said many things that were really devastating to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. And we'll get into that. But the bomb that they dropped was, they said they were aware of an active criminal investigation of the Clinton Foundation that was being run through the FBI and in particular the Little Rock field office. And with that, Meadows came forward and goes, well, then I guess it's apparent why Prosecutor Huber didn't show up, because if there's an active criminal investigation,
can't talk.
A prosecutor cannot be involved in a hearing in a situation that's discussing issues that could well be related to a criminal prosecution. And it goes back to something that we said earlier in this interview, is that the last thing anybody wants is to compromise the ultimate end result of a prosecution because somebody jumped the gun a little bit, and where the defense, because let's face it, right, the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bushes and whomever, they're going to have the best legal team around. It's going to make O.J. Simpson's defense team, the dream team, look like a bunch of chumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to have the best people, the most criminal minds in the legal industry defending them. And they're going to point at anything to try to get their clients off. So
a mistrial or whatever.
A mistrial, this information, even the, and you know how they throw smoke and mirrors all over the place. You know, and just because Huber's sitting in the same room that these guys are talking about an active, well, you had the prosecutor in the room and they were talking about an active criminal investigation of the Clintons. So the fact that this is all tainted and this is grounds for a mistrial, and I mean you can just see it happening. So I believe there were two reasons why Huber didn't show. One, or several reasons. One, he was not going to present information because it's under investigation about the Clinton email situation, how it was investigated by the FBI, and he's not going to present information as it relates to the whole Russian hoax collusion thing, which he was tasked with, because this is about the Clinton Foundation. But I also believe he was used for misdirection, because what this did is this took the pressure off of Moynihan and Doyle. Let me tell you something. With the track record of whistleblowers coming forward, and let's face it, Barack Obama declared war on whistleblowers.
Hated them.
Hated them. I mean, he had the NSA specifically targeting them.
Yes.
Right? And then there was retribution to whistleblowers. I mean, just look at a schmo like me speaking about Obamacare and the problems with Obamacare and how half of it was hidden in the stimulus bill. You know, we had to deal, myself and my family had to deal with the IRS, right? So this is how they handle a civilian, let alone somebody who's employed by them, right? So what they did is I think they focused, in part of deception, focusing on Huber, which gave Moynihan and Doyle an easy channel to come in with, get them out of harm's way, protect them, and get them in front of a televised hearing. Remember, Congress, and this was made incredibly apparent when Moynihan, who was really excellent, one of these whistleblowers, he looked at Meadows and let's face it, they were getting heat from the Republican side as well as the Democrat side, right? Yeah. About, well, who are you guys to present? He said, look, I'm not going to present all of our documents to you folks because you can't prosecute anybody through Congress. Okay? And I'm not going to jeopardize the prosecution of the foundation of what we have found because I give you information. Because what Moynihan was saying is anything I give to you folks, you're going to leak it. You're going to leak it to the tentacle of the globalist syndicate, the bought off lamestream fake media that you discussed. You're going to leak it to the globalists there. You're going to leak it to the globalists on the Republican side, globalists on the Democrat side. There's no positive benefit for us to give you 6,000 pages of documents that opens up the entire can of worms known as the Clinton Foundation on the criminal charges.
And, now we're talking about the Clinton Foundation. I mean, this is the biggest stink bomb there is, and it's simple. It's a simple story. It's not a charity. It's never been a charity. When it stopped collecting money for the archival library in Little Rock, it's not a charity. All that money, these guys said between I don't know, hundreds of millions to up to 2.5 billion on paper. Now, Charles Ortel says we don't have no idea what they ran through. There could be $100 billion. I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of money, which, Hillary Clinton's paying for a wedding out of it and all that stuff. But it's not a charity. Anybody cover that in the mainstream press? Did Fox cover that? Hey, the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative, not a charity. All that money you gave to them. I was actually asked by George Stephanopoulos when I was at ABC in 2004 to come to Washington, to come to a dinner and pay for and help support the Clinton Foundation, to help give some money. George Stephanopoulos, reporter, journalist. Yeah, he's journalist. Yeah, I didn't do it because I thought, wow, that's really partisan. I mean, I'm not supposed to be partisan. I'm not going to do this.
And remember how he got that job, right?
Yeah,
he was Bill Clinton's punching bag in the Oval Office. Bill Clinton used to parade him in every morning with Bill Clinton's temper, yell and scream at him for stuff he wasn't happy with, and then they parade George Stephanopoulos out of the Oval Office. And that's what he was for a couple, 3 years before he got the gig in the bought-off lamestream fake media to carry the water for the globalists there.
But one thing I want to bring up with the Clinton Foundation, now we're talking about it. I mean, Horowitz had in his report, we talked about it on your show, and it talked about a meeting between Comey and a top deputy at the FBI, and one of the meeting notes said that they were going to talk about, because nobody could remember it, and that was Clinton Foundation and crimes against children. So the Clinton Fraud Foundation, which is not a charity, and then them doing evil stuff to children was a meeting note with the FBI that Comey couldn't remember. That was in the Horowitz report. Listen, if he and Fox, nobody covered that. But that was in a report. I mean, that's in a report. And
no, it's labeled conspiracy theory, Greg, and it's in black and white. And you've had it on your show. We've discussed it on your platform. We've discussed it on my platform.
That's right? A stink bomb. If Horowitz was in the tank, he wouldn't drop that stink bomb.
I mean, he wouldn't have dropped all these stink bombs that's leading to people being fired and terminated in the Department of Justice and FBI that at this level, at the highest levels, that's never happened in our country's history.
There are some people that write me saying nobody's going to go to jail. They're not going to prosecute anybody. Please tell us all that at some point the hammer of justice is going to drop.
You don't have to listen, Greg. Folks don't have to listen to me. Just listen to what Moynihan and Doyle said at that hearing in public. Okay? Again, not covered in the bought-off lamestream fake media, including controlled opposition Fox News.
But the people are going to be prosecuted.
You get grief whenever we bring up about Fox News and we tell the truth about Fox. I get incredible grief about it. But the bottom line is they're controlled opposition. Everybody buying into this, they're fair and balanced, and they're the yin to the yang of the globalists. Forget it. They're part of the globalist syndicate. Just look at their players. I mean, Murdoch sits in the Council on Foreign Relations, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. Well, then
listen to what Moynihan and Doyle said. A couple things, right? With the Clinton Foundation. The foundation, and you mentioned this, and you've talked about this, and you've dissected this with Charles Ortel. The foundation has acted as a foreign agent, an unregistered foreign agent of multiple countries, and it's not entitled to its 501c3 charitable status. They also talked about misrepresentation and misappropriation of funds. They did not comply with the regulations, as you've stated, Greg. The foundation was based in the Clinton Library. All this other stuff they've done, Clinton Global Initiative, all these other things have nothing to do with the charter from the IRS for their 501c3 status. So they're in violation. They said that they were involved with organizations, countries, and issues that, according to IRS regulations, they were not granted status to do. They talked about misuse of funds. They didn't use funds for charitable causes. They said, direct statement, they're not a charitable organization, but they were a closely held family partnership that was used to advance the agendas of the family members, Bill, Hillary, Chelsea. And they also said the donors were subject to taxes since that they were taking tax deductions that they were donating to a charitable organization. Thank goodness you didn't take Stephanopoulos on his idea, because you'd have tax issues right now, Greg.
Yeah.
Okay. In addition, they said European countries were in discussions with high-level senior officials at the Clinton Foundation, read Bill and Hillary, with contracts not associated with the guidelines for the Clinton Foundation. Their administration charges were at least 60% of funds raised, when the charity should have an administration charge of about 15%. In addition, pay-to-play donations were rampant. So in other words, donate to the Clinton Foundation, and guess what? Hillary, who's now Secretary of State, will make sure that you get the weapons you want. Okay? They specifically isolated Mozambique with the Clinton Foundation, acting as a foreign agent. Listen to this, that with Mozambique, the Clinton Foundation was brokering money and brokering pharmaceuticals. Then they were asked the question, based on the facts, do you, Moynihan and Doyle, believe there was probable cause of criminal wrongdoing? Answer, yeah, both said, yes, significant wrongdoing. Do you believe that there was criminal activity with the Clinton Foundation? Answer, quote, yes. In addition, they were told by the CFO, who stated it's been pushed through Zero Hedge, quote, I know where all the bodies are buried. They went on, Mr. Clinton mixed personal business and the Clinton Foundation used donated funds for personal use. And they were pushed, well, what type of personal use? Quote, funds were used as a piggy bank for senior leaders of the foundation, Bill, Hillary, Chelsea, for personal expenses such as vacations, end quote. And then they dropped the bomb. And they said, it is our knowledge, because we have been in touch with the field office of the FBI in Little Rock, that there is an active criminal investigation that's open and ongoing of the foundation. And then they were pushed because there were a couple of Republicans, Mises or something his name was. Well, how do you know that? What evidence do you have of that? They said, the FBI was calling us. And this is after we turned over documents. But if you want proof, they said, we have pictures. So, in other words, they were clued off that Department of Justice airplane, a jumbo jet, was going to land in Little Rock, and that people were going to get off that plane and go to the foundation and take boxes out of the foundation and put them back on that plane. And they documented it with pictures. The only way that Moynihan and Doyle could have known that is because they were tipped off by somebody in the FBI or Department of Justice saying, hey, just to let you know that we're on this, why don't you stop by Little Rock's airport about, let's say, 8 a.m. and check out the plane and check out the tail number and run a check on that, where it's from. And by the way, why don't you check out where they go and what they take out of where they're going? And why don't you check out that those same boxes are being put on that plane? And let me tell you, and they went on. So now they've unearthed the fact that there is this active, ongoing criminal investigation of the Clinton Foundation that's ongoing, run not through Huber, but through the FBI and through the Department of Justice.
Separate cases.
And then, as you said, and they said, well, conclude this, give us some conclusions about the money. How much money do you think was run through the foundation? And this is where they said between $400 million and $2.5 billion that they've traced was used improperly. Now, one other piece of information I was told is that's a Department of Justice plane on the same week Moynihan and Doyle testified in front of Congress. A Department of Justice plane flew again to Little Rock. More documents were put on that plane and flown back to Washington. And a Department of Justice plane that same week flew to New York at the airport closest to the Chappaqua Clinton home. And documents were also put on that plane and flown back to Washington. So when people say nothing is being done, Tracy Beans in her investigation has unearthed the fact that there is a grand jury impaneled for the Uranium One issue. She's unearthed that with her research.
That's another separate case. Again, that's a whole another separate case. It's a huge case.
Right.
These are all massive, never seen before cases in America. This is massive. You never had a former president and former Secretary of State involved in a massive charity fraud. You never had a sitting president involved in a fraud, involved in a sedition and treason and knock out an incoming president. You never had a former president flying pallets of money to the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, according to his State Department, Obama, and a deal that they said was signed that was never signed. You never had a Secretary of State and a president funneling arms to a known terror organization to overthrow Assad. These are all massive, mind-blowing cases.
That's right. And it actually links into why the deep state targeted General Flynn. You mentioned this weapons running operation run through the Obama administration. Well, what I've been told by a number of folks from different agencies that the Clinton Foundation is actually a front for one of our intelligence agencies, and it's used for not only money laundering, but it's used for laundering weapons. And let's face it, there have been and remember in this testimony from Doyle and Moynihan, remember how he said that they had this relationship with Mozambique that involved money laundering money, but also pharmaceuticals?
Yeah.
Well, there's some recent deaths, and all we have to do is look north of the border here in Canada recently, within the past 6-8 months. Remember, there was this pharmaceutical executive who reportedly was a murder-suicide with his wife. Well, it turns out now with the investigation, it appears that she had been tortured and then killed, and then he was killed, and it wasn't a murder-suicide. Well, take a guess who they had a relationship with pharmaceutical sales, and in particular through Haiti.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the Clinton Foundation.
The Clinton Fraud Foundation.
So, and go to General Flynn. The reason why he was targeted is specifically what you discussed with the weapons running operation as it relates to Benghazi. I've had a number of different people, General Paul Vallely, General Tom McInerney, Admiral Lyons, God rest his soul. He recently died. He was in charge of the Pacific Fleet. He was an icon in the Navy. He has been a regular on my show, a regular source for me over the years. Admiral Lyons. They sat on a Benghazi commission, and their conclusions were that Benghazi was a weapons running operation that was run by the Obama administration, in particular Hillary Clinton at the State Department, that they were bringing arms into Libya. Stevens essentially became the first ambassador to Al-Qaeda. We were weaponizing Al-Qaeda to get rid of Gaddafi. Why? Because Gaddafi was no longer playing the globalist game. He was turning in terrorists that the globalists had supported. He was talking about leaving the utilization of the dollar. He was talking about having a gold-backed currency, the gold dinar, that it was in direct opposition to the central banks, the globalist-controlled central banks, who are actually the puppet masters of the Obamas and Clintons and Bushes and Ryans and McConnells and Schumers and Pelosi's and Romneys and McCain's and all these actors. That we were funneling arms into Al-Qaeda to get rid of Gaddafi, which they did. That country is a smoldering hole right now compared to what it used to be. And we're upset about that. The globalists are perfectly happy about that because they rape and pillage yet another piece of real estate and a bunch of people and got their gold and silver out and stopped what Gaddafi was trying to do. And I'm not trying to say Gaddafi was a good guy. He was a bad guy, but he had flipped a number of years before to playing against the globalists. So then once they killed Gaddafi, Stevens, the ambassador, was in charge of bringing those arms, getting them back, and then funneling him into Turkey. The last person he met with was a Turkish official, right? Get him into Turkey into Syria. And remember, Erdogan's, the president of Turkey, or whatever he is, dictator of Turkey, whatever you want to call him, Erdogan's son was involved with ISIS of running their oil.
Yeah.
So then they were bringing the arms into ISIS, and essentially what was said was the United States and our allies were weaponizing, training, funding ISIS, and General Flynn in 2014. He started leaking some of this information. Remember, he used to be the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency under Obama. He started leaking this information, and he was summarily fired by Obama. So again, because he wasn't going to be part and parcel to that. And he said, "My gosh, this crazy group that they're essentially." Obama referred to him as a JV team. Well, actually, he just should have referred to him as our team. Yeah. And so remember, Obama, ISIS was not going to be. They were expanding. Under Hillary Clinton's watch at State Department and Barack Obama's watch as president, ISIS not only came into being but flourished.
Oh yeah, big time.
But what happened under Trump?
Blew him to pieces. And
that's just not coincidence. That's just not, he cut off their money supply, right, to starve them out, and then made them so that they were vulnerable so they could be taken out militarily.
Yeah. They're shallow what they used to be.
So, there's so many different issues here. And I understand why people are frustrated, but, they got to look around. When he got there, we had a corrupt police force, right? The FBI and Department of Justice. So before you can have a trial, you gotta make sure the cops that are arresting people are doing it the right way and they're not part of the problem, right? Okay, so that took some time to clean up. Then he looked at the judiciary and said, "We got a bunch of bad actors here in the judiciary," right? So what's he been doing? He's been bringing new people in that are constitutionalists, rule of law people into all levels of the judiciary. I can't remember how many he's had now appointed, 85, 86, 88 judges at all different levels, plus 2 Supreme Court justices. And so now you got a sheriff that's more honest, although let's face it, there's still deep state players in there because these folks are like cockroaches. They're everywhere. Second, you had to clean out the judiciary. Well, he's doing pretty good there, but there's still a bunch of deep state cockroaches there too. And so if he would have brought charges, let's say he would have brought charges a year ago. If you have dirty sheriffs that are conducting dirty investigations so that the cases can be thrown out, what good does it do that Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or George Bush was in an orange jumpsuit a year ago only to get a mistrial and get put back out on the street? Okay, so then you got to get the judiciary more in line. Well, he's been doing that. But what happens if you get in front of a dirty judge? We've already seen the ramifications of a dirty judge with Judas Roberts when he was, I believe, blackmailed to flip his vote in order to support Obamacare back in 2012. So you got to clean this stuff up, and it takes a lot of time, and it's very frustrating to people. But, it's also troublesome that people that pride themselves as being patriots want to give up so easily.
I mean, I tell people all the time, I said, this has been going on since at least the Kennedy assassination, because Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone gunman. I mean, it's just a guy with a gun, right?
He wasn't, Greg.
Just one guy?
I'm convinced he was even a gunman.
Let's see the autopsy photos and an unredacted Warren Commission. It's just a guy with a gun, right? Let's see all the photos. Oh, can't show you those. But this has been going on since the Kennedy administration. You think this is going to get cleaned up in a couple of years?
No, I think it's been going on long before.
Well, probably, yeah, but at least Kennedy.
At a minimum, it started in 1913 when they took over our money supply, right, with the Jekyll Island stuff. And
I think the Fed should be audited.
And maybe even before that, all the way back to the Civil War, and maybe even before the Civil War. But this is so deep.
Yeah.
This is, when people say deep state, yeah, it is deep. I mean, it's almost it's bottomless. This corruption, this criminality, and this is why it's beyond one guy.
Right.
Everybody has to realize that this is a fight not just of Trump. If you value freedom and you value liberty and you value your future, your kids' future, your grandkids' future, this is a fight that every one of our viewers and listeners has to be actively involved in.
Our allies were against Trump.
It might be the way they're involved is they're sharing information with people that maybe are not of like mind. Okay, that's their part of the fight. But people have to get off the couch, and people have to join the fight, because this is more than one person's fight or a small group of people's fight.
Even our allies were against Merkel. Merkel just said just today that you have to give up your national sovereignty. Man, they're coming out in your face now. Countries have to give up their national sovereignty, according to the Chancellor of Germany. We have to have one new world order. Hey, they took bribes over in Germany for this Iran deal. That's what the top Iranian advisor said. They took bribes in France. They took bribes in the UK. The UK's intelligence services were trying to undermine Donald Trump. That's pretty clear. Nobody's gone to jail over there, Theresa May. But this is a huge, mammoth, global undertaking. I mean, I tell people all the time, you didn't think we were going to knock this out in just 2 years, do you? You didn't think we were going to fix this, right, in 2 years?
Angela Merkel. Nation state, you said it, nation states must give up their sovereignty to a new world order. That would be the same new world order that, who spoke about all the time? How about George H.W. Bush?
Yes.
I believe in his presidency, he spoke about a new world order over 200 times.
Yeah.
Of which Billy Clinton was fully on board, of which George W. Bush was on board, of which Barack Obama was fully on board. This is what she said, quote, "Nation states must today be prepared to give up their sovereignty." According to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who told an audience in Berlin that sovereign nation states must not listen to the will of their citizens when it comes to questions of immigration, borders, or even sovereignty.
She's a traitor. They should hang her in Germany.
Right, she is. But so was all these individuals that have talked about a new world order, that have pushed a new world order, that have pushed the policies of a new world order. And this is why everybody gets upset with me about this. George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, all of them are part of that new world order globalist crowd. And all too often people say, well, this is a Democrat issue. No, it's a Democrat and it's a Republican issue. Just look at this latest Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan.
Weasel.
To call him a rhino is really covering up what he really was. He was a globalist who was intent on taking down the system.
America.
Yes.
Let's talk about the funeral. Well, this is a perfect time to talk about that. I still want to talk about healthcare and this big ruling that said that there's no more tax, so no more Obamacare. But I want to get to that. You're expert on this, and I want to get to that. But let's go to the funeral where everybody opened these cards and everybody opened them up and went, had all these looks in their face. What went on? Well, what were they opening up? What went on with the cards? What do your sources say went on with these cards at the George H.W. Bush 41 funeral?
So the day before the funeral, December 4th, two of my sources called me up and said, "Are you going to be watching the funeral tomorrow?" I said, "Heck no." Are you kidding? I mean, this has been ridiculous. All this fawning over this globalist George H.W. Bush. I can't even. I'm not watching that. They go, "You need to watch it, and watch close and see what happens." And I go, "What am I watching for?" "We're not telling you. Just watch." I go, "Oh." So I end up watching the thing, and I'm watching the thing live, and I'm watching, and there were several observations I made in watching this thing that at the time I didn't realize were all going to add up. But a couple of things, when they first all started getting there, everybody's kind of having a party, right? The Clintons are talking to the Bidens, and they're saying some things to the Obamas. And what's interesting is when Pence came in, he greeted Hillary like an old friend. And I get a lot of grief for this, but from the very beginning, I've had huge problems and reservations about Pence. And the reason is because every time I see him, I get the same feeling I would get around some really bad actors in Washington that I knew were bad actors, that were played on the globalist side. And he walks in and, he's carrying on with Hillary, and they're laughing and carrying on, and it's kind of like, and I'm watching this and I'm going, well, this adds up. I mean, again, here we go, And I'm watching this thing, and then all of a sudden Trump's going to show up. And as President Trump comes in and Melania, a couple things. I mean, Hillary, right before this, Hillary is looking through the program, right? And I see, and something falls out. Well, I didn't think that much of it at the time until Jimmy Carter looks over at Hillary and he starts looking at his thing like, oh God, oh man, this is sad. I didn't get one of these. And he looks at Rosalind and he's having her go through, and she's not getting. And poor Jimmy seems really bummed out he didn't get this, right? So I start thinking, well, this is kind of weird. Hillary got something, and then when she looked at it, Hillary, I mean, she didn't get crazy, but she had an expression on her face that was a concerned look, right? And then later, I saw the Bidens, same thing, and they were kind of acting up, and the Pence's got one, and the Obama's got one. I mean, this was later. I saw that, but I initially seen Hillary's, and then Jimmy Carter's reaction. So, well, he didn't get one, she got one. No, let's just tuck that away. And then President Trump comes in, and her reaction was, Oh, I mean, whoa! I'm not looking at this guy. I am. I mean, she was. Uh, it wasn't pretty, right? And what was interesting was when President Trump walked in and Melania, seated behind them were the Pences. Neither President Trump nor the First Lady said hello to them or shook their hands.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Oh no! And at the time, I said, "Well, maybe this is what the guys were talking about that I should watch for because they know how much I really dislike Pence, and this is an indication that yeah, there's something brewing between the two of them, and that this maybe we're going to see Pence moving out or something down the line. So this is what they wanted me to watch. Didn't say a word to them, either of them. They sat down and they said some things with the Obamas, but everybody was very, very cold, right? Then George W. comes in with the family, and he wasn't looking good. He was kind of wobbly, right? He was, and seemed really, and I'm thinking, well, maybe it's because, of his dad dying. On the other hand, his dad had his dad had been having medical problems for many years. So, and his dad was, I don't know, 90 something. So, it's not like his dad was 50 and died, right? I mean, this was not a shock. And so he just looked a little bit off, kind of nervous and that kind of thing. And then occasionally they'd be shooting, the coverage would be looking at him and the family, and he was just looking very ill at ease. And at one point they showed him and he was kind of writing something on a piece of paper. Well, the word I heard was that what were in the envelopes that Pence's, Obama's, Biden's, Clinton's received, and as I was told, there were a number of other people in the audience who also got envelopes. And the envelopes were not, if you will, indictments, but actually an indication of coming attractions of who was going to be on the hook. Okay.
Wow.
But that's different. So then we go through the service, and George W. gives his eulogy to his dad, and then he walks and he sits down. And I'm watching this, and he's kind of almost rocking in his chair a little bit, okay? And licking his lips and rubbing his hands. And this is a guy who is obviously very nervous about something. And it's toward the end of the ceremony. So you'd think if he's going to be doing that, he'd be doing that right before he went up to speak, although he's given thousands of speeches. But now he's acting like this, and his speech is over. And now they have the casket, and they're passing by. And as they pass by, this is where Laura looks at something, not an envelope, and shows Jeb, who should never play poker because he just looks like he's about to vomit. And the question is, what was that? And one of the things I saw afterwards, they had a wider angle where Trump is watching all this. President Trump and he's watching all of this. So it was my indication that the boss knew what was happening here. Okay. And what I believe is that at that time where they showed George Bush writing something, George Bush wrote something. And then as the casket was passing by, which I believe was what he was tasked to do, he showed it to Laura, and Laura showed it to Jeb. And Laura said to W, I think something like, "Is this real?" And his answer was, "Yup." And he put his head down, kind of like.
So they were put on notice that you guys are in trouble.
What that note was, what I was told, is not what the other people had. What George W. had written, it's my understanding, was something about Pence. You see, Pence was the Bush's insurance policy. Pence, I believe, from what I've told, is a globalist. And the plan ultimately was to move Trump out. You take that any way you want, okay? Impeachment or other means. Move Trump out, Pence steps in. I believe if you go back to last year's Super Bowl, who was in George H.W.'s private box? But Pence. And it was my understanding that Pence was going to slide in, and and Pence was seen as the insurance policy for the globalists in particular, with the Bush family and all the operations they're involved with. And when Laura saw this, and the note being Pence is out, Pence is done, she realized, we got a problem, and showed it to Jeb, who essentially runs the family business, whatever that might be. And this is why he looked like he was going to vomit. And there was one thing that was out there which showed that Jeb was looking directly at the Secret Service agent behind W. Interesting, right? There are two agents right behind Bush, W. But if you look behind all the other presidents on the other side, the Secret Service agents were not the row behind them.
What does that mean?
Well, I think what it means is I think they were there just to kind of let George know, George, you got to deliver the information to your family, and we're going to make sure you do that because we're here behind you. You got to uphold.
Why would they do that? Why would they want them to deliver this information? Like you guys are in trouble. Is he just trolling them, or what's the point of that?
So a couple things. Yeah, I think that part of it, but also I think a couple things. Number one, the timing. Remember that hearing with the whistleblowers was set for December 5th.
Yeah.
George H.W.'s death was announced November 30th.
Yeah.
Notice I said was announced November 30th.
Yeah.
And then they decided, we want to have the memorial service on when? December 5th, the same day the whistleblowers were supposed to come forward about the Clinton Foundation. And I believe they thought if they could get this thing delayed, maybe they could take matters in their own hands and alter what happened at that hearing at a later date. And this is why I think everybody started to push the limelight on Huber, because they wanted everybody to think Huber was going to deliver the goods when, in fact, the guys delivering the goods were Moynihan and Doyle.
The Trump people, the white hats, were putting got it.
And I also believe they wanted to get everybody in the same room, and they wanted to deliver the information when they knew they were under view of cameras.
And you think these people will be tearing them? They'll be destroying each other to try to get a deal so they don't all go to jail for the rest of their lives. I mean, or be executed. I mean, they committed treason. We're in a war footing, according to the Kavanaugh and Lindsey Graham exchange at the Kavanaugh confirmation hearing. We're in a war stance, which means anything you do like this is treason.
These people, I believe, are all involved in very nefarious, horrible criminal activity that affects the welfare of every American citizen and the sovereignty of our country. That being said, I also believe they're amateur criminals. They're not hardened criminals in a sense that I believe when it comes down to it, I agree with you, Greg. I think that these people will turn on each other like cornered rats, like you can't believe, to try to save themselves, as opposed to somebody taking a hit for the team. Okay, and saying, I'll take the hit for the team as long as the whole remains. None of these people have that philosophy. It's every person for themselves.
Well, what about the Twitter that has been out recently? It's yet another thing. We're going to get to the ruling. I want to talk about that too. The ruling on Obamacare. What about all the Twitter accounts? I mean, I've seen one after another where they just radio silence. All of a sudden, they just have shut down. Just before Christmas, and there's hardly anybody saying anything to anyone. Are these guys all in Gitmo, or what's going on?
I don't believe they're in Gitmo.
Are they under house arrest?
I did run it. Here's what I ran by folks I know that are very knowledgeable and have always been on target. I said, look, there's been this social media. I mean, the Obamas, for their Christmas photo, posted a photo from 2 years ago. This radio silence from these people that were shooting their mouths off all the time. I mean, the last time Brennan shot his mouth off was, I think, December 20th, and his last tweet was just ripe with desperation, panic. I mean, just hysteria. I said, these folks have been awfully quiet. I go, is this silence related to what happened, the information that was delivered at the funeral? And the answer I received was yes.
So let me get this straight. Let me get in here with you.
They were incarcerated? No, I don't think they're incarcerated. But I do believe that they are desperate, panicked, and operative word, I think, petrified.
They were put on notice. The jig's up. You're going to be prosecuted, and none of you are safe. I don't care how high your office was. I don't care if you're former president or whatever. You guys are going to be prosecuted, and they're going to go up the line to their higher handlers, to the Rockefellers, the Pacer family, the Rothschilds. I mean, they're going to go all the way up. Are they not?
Yes, I believe that, and that's what's taking so long and why it is so frustrating for everybody. I also believe one other thing. When you watch that video of the funeral service, you'll see that Laura was surprised by the note that was given to her. Not the thing that fell out of a program, but what was handwritten, I believe, by W. And Jeb, as I said, shouldn't be a poker player. He looked like he was going to vomit. But the guy who seemed nervous, but when he was obviously involved in this, in a sense that I believe, from what I understand, W flipped a number of months ago.
Wow, that's news.
And I remember, the day before the funeral,
he flipped to give state's evidence to save himself.
Not just himself. Here's what I believe he did. If you remember, the day before the funeral, all of us, W and Laura, just those two, Trump arranged for them to stay at the Blair House across the street from the White House. And they also had another meeting at the White House. Just W and Laura were invited. And I believe that this is where President Trump, if you will, kind of went through, okay, here's what's going to happen at the funeral. Here's what's going to happen. Here's when this is going to happen. Here's when that's going to happen. Here's when this is when you're going to do this. This is when you're going to hand the stuff to Laura. Okay? And I believe several months ago, and remember, it is also my understanding that it wasn't just George H.W. Bush that ran the family business, that Barbara was actively involved in that. And remember, she died earlier this year.
Yeah.
He's been ill for an extended period of time. And from what I understand, George W. had a point. He came to a point in his life where he said, "Look, I can't be involved in this stuff. I've had involvement, but I can no longer be involved in this kind of activities." And I believe he reached out to President Trump and could well have said, "Look, I will give you information on everything.
Cheney's got to go down on
across
this.
The board. No one's safe.
Cheney's got to go down.
Obama's, Clinton's, all of them. Okay? And when it comes to issues that you and I've discussed, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's the drug trade, whether it's whatever information, I believe he said, I'm coming clean, but this is what I want. I want not just for me, but for my family. And I'll tell you how and a confirmation I have of this. Remember the day after the funeral.
Yep.
Who did President Trump nominate to be his attorney general designate?
A former Bush AG, is that right?
William Barr.
Yeah, William Barr.
At one point it held the attorney general position under who? George H.W. Bush. And I believe that part of the deal, and everybody said, we can't figure this out. You know, Trump must be a globalist if he put this Barr in there, who was the attorney general for a period of time under a globalist George H.W. Bush. This is horrible. Here's why I think that happened, Greg. I think part of the deal that was constructed with W was, look, you hand over all this information, and we go after all these folks, all not just the middle level puppets, including Soros, but all these folks all the way up the food chain, like you're talking about, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Pacers, Pinkuses, Warburgs, all of them. Okay, but to assure you that we're good on our side of the deal, is we will put in William Barr, who was the Attorney General under your father for a period of time. And Barr, I think ultimately, what he'll do is he will push the Bush family to the side as far as prosecutions. And I believe he'll focus more on the other side of the ledger, that being Clinton's, Obama's, and a lot of these other players.
What about the 9/11 thing? I mean, holy cow. I mean, what about 9/11? I mean, come on. Buildings falling straight down after Building 7, you can't explain that. So,
well, and there was a recent ruling, right, where now, and this was big that the mainstream media did not touch, and now it's been opened up for another investigation, right?
Yeah, they got it.
And you know, I have so 9/11.
That's a fraud. Come on, 3,000 people died.
Right. That's the ultimate. That's the bottom line, right? We had at least 3,000 people die.
Correct.
And if you want, one way to look at this, I have a background in construction. My dad built big buildings in Chicago, and it's interesting, when that happened, he was still alive. And I called my mom and dad that day and said, on September 11, 2001, and said, hey, I hear from some sources that there might be some attacks in Chicago. Don't go downtown. And they said, okay. And my dad said, this is after the first plane hit. The first plane hit. He goes, I saw what I saw on TV. He goes, but it doesn't make any sense to me he was a civil engineer. He goes, it doesn't make any sense to me from a civil engineering standpoint. He goes, because I know how that building was constructed. It's an exoskeleton type of a structure. He goes, an airplane just doesn't slice through that construct like going into a piece of cheese, okay? Knife into a piece of cheese. He goes, I'm going to make some phone calls. My buddies, architects around the country, fellow construction people, civil engineers, Then the second plane hit. And I called him back, and he said, so I've been on the phone, and none of us can figure any of this out. And he goes, I'll call you back. And then, again, we had a conversation, and now the buildings had fallen. And he said, as much as it didn't make sense before, after watching those buildings fall on their own footprint, Dave, it really doesn't make any sense. None. From an engineering standpoint. And then, at 5 o'clock, Building 7 fell. And he called me, and he was absolutely, he was pissed. And he said, Dave, you call all those, and I'll leave the words he used out. You call those people in Washington, and you find out what was in that Building 7, because you're going to get the answer of why this happened today. He goes, in the history of the world, I can assure you that a structure of that type has never fallen down from a fire. You got it? He goes, that building was brought down. And he goes, I believe it was brought down because that's the real crux of what was going on what happened today.
Building 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fell straight down. Wasn't hit by anything. Is Bush going to get out of that? Is he going to get? He was president when that fraud happened, that crime, that treason. Is he going to get out of that? That was. That the file's still frozen. You still don't have the complete file for the 9/11 Commission report, and that's still frozen. Isn't that still uh, redacted?
Well, yeah,
Yes.
and now they've opened up another investigation.
So is Bush going to get out of that?
Investigation that has been reopened.
So do you think Trump cut a deal to let him get out of that, or just a deal for the other treasons that have happened in America?
I don't know that answer, Greg.
Okay, that's a good answer. It's fine.
I don't know. I don't know that answer, but I can tell you this: that anyone and everyone that was involved in the 9/11 event should be held accountable.
Oh, yes.
Because if they are not, then I don't know how we could ever reestablish the rule of law in this country.
And that's where we're working towards the rule of law. And speaking of the rule of law, the Obamacare, which is a complete fraud, Judge Roberts voted on that. So it was a tax that they told us a million times it wasn't a tax. Well, now it's no longer a tax because the mandate's been removed, correct? So
Correct.
No longer a tax.
No. The tax has been removed. So
the tax has been removed. Okay, sorry.
Tax has been removed. Mandate stays.
Mandate stays, but there's no tax to it.
Right.
Okay.
So here's the deal.
Yeah.
When Obama was selling this, pushing down the throats of the American public, he talked about that Obamacare was like the Obama health care plan, the Unaffordable Care Act, was a three-legged stool. In my mind, heavy emphasis on the word stool, and I don't mean something you sit on, right? Right. So he talked about there's this massive part called Obamacare. That's essentially what I determined: the rationing boards, the enforcement boards, all the federal agencies associated with all. There's this massive Obamacare, and along with it, second leg of the stool is the mandate that says you have to, you American citizens have to have this. You must purchase this. You must have this. That's the second leg of the stool, and the third leg of the stool is what he called a penalty that was later called a tax because that's what Roberts called it. Obama never wanted to call it a tax until that's what made it actually constitutional. But he kept saying, well, there's the Obamacare, and then there's the mandate, and then there's and Gruber, the guy who called Gruber, Obama's
MIT
architects, yeah, right, who called every American stupid, right? Remember that
Yeah.
guy? And then we had Ezekiel Manuel as part of his advisors, and a lot of these other clowns. They also were talking about the three-legged stool. And if you take one of the legs out, they'd all collapse. So you have Obamacare, and you have the second part of the stool, the mandate that says you have to buy this, and then you have the tax. Well, many people were saying, wait a minute. In the body of the language, the way it was written by the Dems, globalists, and the insurance companies helped write Obamacare, were big writers of it. They said that the mandate, the second leg of the stool, and the first leg of the stool, all of Obamacare, were inseparable. They were inseparable, that you could not have the Obamacare without the mandate. Okay? Well, many people said, well, wait a minute, the mandate is unconstitutional because of the Commerce Clause. Congress cannot force people to buy a product, right? So this is why it went to the Supreme Court. And when it went to the Supreme Court, initially, it's my understanding from sources I have in the Supreme Court, it was a 5-4 decision ruling against Obamacare, with Roberts being in the majority to say it was unconstitutional. But then, so in that group was Kennedy and Thomas and Alito and
Scalia,
can't forget Scalia, and Roberts. Well, then, so they make this decision, and then they all write it up, right? And then a couple months later, they present it. And it was presented, I believe, on, June 28th, 2012, I think was the date. And a couple days before that, Roberts flipped his vote, okay? And I believe he flipped his vote because of the control files against the guy, and it had to do with his family. So I understand. He flips his vote, and all of a sudden now he's in the minority, which has now become the majority, 5-4, that Obamacare is constitutional. And what he did is he essentially rewrote the law. And what he said was, well, and here it is. He said, Obamacare is a revenue-raising device permitted under Congress's ability and taxing power. So what he said was, because the first and second leg of the stools, Obamacare, massive bureaucracy, mandate, are tied to the penalty, which he now calls a tax, and Congress can tax because of that, it's constitutional. Now, the mandate he ruled, and I think the majority ruled, the majority did rule, that the mandate was not constitutional. But because the mandate was tied to the tax, then the tax was constitutional. It was all constitutional. Okay, now enter this Fort Worth judge by the name of Reed O'Connor. Many people have demagogued him, have gone after him, say he doesn't know the law, he doesn't know. He does. This guy's brilliant. And here's what he did. He did a reverse Roberts on him. It really was. I mean, he took the bass-ackward logic of what Roberts did, and he used it against Roberts and the globalists. And here's what he said. He said, okay, look, back this past year, Congress did not get rid of the mandate. Here's where a lot of people get this messed up. They say, oh, Congress got rid of the mandate. No,
I got it messed up.
Right? No, Congress didn't get rid of the mandate.
The tax.
They held Obamacare and they held the mandate, the first leg of the stool. Okay? And they said, okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the tax. Okay? No more tax. That's what Congress did in 2017. Now, I got to give President Trump a lot of credit because at the time, Paul Ryan, globalist, just toad of the highest order, can't stand the guy. Paul Ryan was trying to push through Ryan Care. And at first, Trump was going, okay, well, it's different than Obamacare, so maybe this is an okay thing. Well, a number of us got information in front of him and said, no, 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 no. Ryan Care is nothing more than Obamacare, and it's going to take his name off of it, it's going to put your name on it, and you're never going to get rid of this monstrosity. Don't sign on to Ryan Care. It does not help the affordability, availability, quality care. It's bad. Don't do it. And to his credit, he backed off. And what he did is he said, well, okay, I'll tell you what. Congress, just get rid of the tax. Just get rid of the tax. This is brilliant. So he got all wound up. So he got rid of the tax, and when he got rid of the tax, then a suit was filed by 20 attorney generals across the country. So wait a minute. The whole thing that made this thing constitutional was the tax. If the tax is gone, and the Supreme Court has already ruled in 2012 that the mandate was unconstitutional, but because it was tied to the tax,
it's toast.
Let's get rid of the tax is gone. So we're filing suit that Obamacare is not constitutional because the tax is no longer there. And this is the brilliance when you read the ruling of Judge Reed O'Connor out of Fort Worth. He says exactly that. Look, the Supreme Court has already ruled. You guys have already ruled. Obamacare is unconstitutional if you just have the first and second legs of the stool. It's the third leg of the stool that made it constitutional. And because the third leg of the stool, the tax, is no longer there, guess what? The mandate still is unconstitutional. Therefore, Obamacare is unconstitutional. Then the whole thing is unconstitutional. Now, many people have said, well, this is going to get appealed and it's going to get overturned in the Court of Appeals. Okay, so the Court of Appeals this goes to is not the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that, remember, have had all these adverse rulings on everything, right? That's a globalist control court. But it's going to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Well, take a guess. Take a guess what's been going on. As President Trump has been pointing to the Ninth Circuit and saying these people are bad judges, which they are. Okay, they're globalist control. These are bad judges. What's he been doing? He has been loading up, guess which Court of Appeals with Trump judges?
The Fifth.
The Fifth. So right now on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals,
you know what? Let me back up. They're not Trump judges.
They're
not constitutional.
They're rule of law judges.
They're judges who are gonna follow the Constitution.
That's right.
That's really what we're talking about here. Not making it up.
Well, but they are Trump judges in a sense that they're rule of law oriented, as opposed to what an Obama and Trump judges have been, which are globalist controlled.
That's right.
Two different rules.
They don't follow the Constitution.
Right. So, but you are right.
They follow. So, that's really all you have to have.
Rule of law, constitutionalist judges. So now there are very few judges that were appointed by Obama and Clinton, Bill Clinton, to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. What my people have told me that know the judicial system inside out, they said this is going to go to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it's going to be upheld. And then people say, yeah, well, it'll just go back to Supreme Court, and it's just, well, wait a minute. For the Supreme Court to take a case, they have to vote on it, right?
Yeah.
And the word I hear out of folks I know that have access into the Supreme Court, they believe, based on Gorsuch and based on Kavanaugh being there, and this being an out for Roberts, that the Supreme Court will vote not to take the case up.
And it will stand.
And it will stand.
So Obamacare, poof, be gone.
To all those people, and this is important for our listeners, because they're going to be at holiday events, family events, and everybody's going to say, oh, this is terrible because millions of Americans are going to be without insurance or health care. Stop. Wrong. If you look at the states of Iowa and Idaho, I've had a fellow on my show that's networked into the insurance industry that despises the big insurance entities. His name is David Powell. He's out of Kansas. They actually did this in Kansas. When they opened up and got rid of essentially they opened up so that there could be competition rather than collusion between insurance companies, within 24 hours, 6 to 10 times the number of policies were available for health insurance.
Boom.
Once it was determined that there was going to be competition in a state. And according to David Powell, and I believe him on this because we've seen this in a number of different states, the insurance companies already have these policies available. Now, granted, they don't make as much money for the insurance companies as they do with these other programs, because let's face it, the insurance companies have made out like banshees when it comes to... Everybody says that insurance companies are against Obamacare. They're for it. They help write it. If you look at insurance company stock prices, they've gone up 600, 800% by the time the first phase of Obamacare was passed, which was hidden in the stimulus bill, to right now. So who cares if the insurance companies don't make enough money? Who cares? I mean, it's a criminal enterprise as far as I'm concerned anyway. Bottom line is that they will still be in business, but they're going to have to compete rather than collude. And all these people that say that, here's the other thing. People with pre-existing conditions they're going to die. Okay, I just want to say, I want to address this because this is really important. Greg, pre-existing conditions. Prior to Obamacare, there were 35 states that had high-risk pools that were paid for with federal dollars, state dollars, and money that was mandated that insurance companies pay in each state to create these high-risk pools for people with pre-existing conditions. There were 35 states. If it was the intent of Obamacare to get rid of pre-existing conditions, all they have to do is get 15 other states to have high-risk pools. The total cost for high-risk pools across our country right now would be $44 billion. That's a lot of money, but you know what? How much are we spending on Obamacare every year? $2.3 trillion?
That's a drop in the bucket.
Right, a drop in the bucket. So to all those people that say, and you're going to see this in the bought off lamestream fake media, Chucky Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, the Paul Ryans of the world, the Romneys, the Flakes, all these people, they'll be out there saying, oh, people with pre-existing conditions are going to die. No, here's the bottom line. With the institution of high-risk pools, the pre-existing condition becomes non-existent. And remember, the vast majority of people in our country have employer-based insurance policies. It was mandated into law many years ago that if you have an insurance-based policy through your employer, pre-existing conditions are not an issue. Now, you want to talk about death. There's an article that just came out and out of the Journal of the American Medical Association, surprisingly. Now, remember, the AMA is a bunch of globalist hacks that have been bought and paid for by the globalist syndicate. But they even reported this, and this just came out. And this is about Obamacare. And this was actually just reported in Reason Magazine. Here's the headline. It sure looks like this Obamacare program has led to more people dying. To determine whether a government program is successful, it's often necessary to look not only at how well it does, but what it's supposed to do, but what it's doing that isn't supposed to. For example, killing people. Take the hospital readmissions program built in Obamacare. So in Obamacare, if you had a patient, let's say that had surgery or was treated for a condition, heart failure, and then went home, and let's say they came back because they got sick again, the hospital was fined because that patient had to be readmitted. It was really an aberrant part of Obamacare. It was actually sick. But here's what this study just came out in the Journal of the American Medical Association. It was conducted by researchers associated with Beth Israel Deaconess Medical and Harvard Medical School, not exactly conservative bastions. looked at hospitalizations between 2005 and 2015, it found that the 30-day post-discharge mortality, in other words, the number of people dying within 30 days of being discharged, for the number of people who died within a month of leaving the hospital, increased for heart failure patients after the readmissions penalty program was implemented through Obamacare. The rate of increase became more rapid after Medicare started penalizing readmissions. In addition, mortality rates amongst pneumonia patients, which had been stable, also increased. Fewer people were being readmitted to the hospitals, but more people were dying. Well, some people say, okay, so a couple people died. Wait a minute. This is not the first study to conclude that the program increased the death rates.
So wait. So they wouldn't readmit them because they were afraid of getting fined.
Right.
Oh.
That was a part of the policy implemented by Obamacare. I should say, remember, this is not surprising because one of the architects, this guy Ezekiel Emanuel, who is Rahm Emanuel's brother, had published a study in the British medical journal Lancet about the complete lives model, and and here's what it is in essence, and this is why this should not surprise anybody. This is why I went after these guys back in 2009. That model said only people between the ages of 15 and 40 are productive members of society, and people less than 15 years of age and over 40 should have limited healthcare resources allocated to them.
So it was a way to actually get the hospital not to readmit them, send them home, and let them die.
This is not the first study to conclude that the program increased death rates. A separate JAMA study last year looked at about 115,000 Medicare patients and also found that although readmissions for heart failure were down, the number of deaths had increased, with about 5,400 more people dying annually. Okay. So we just outlined 3,000 people died in the World Trade Center, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just keep that in mind.
Every year.
3,000 people died in the World Trade Center needlessly. 5,400 people, almost twice that number, died needlessly just from one condition. This is just heart failure. This is not those other issues related to cancer or other issues related to heart disease or pneumonia. This is 5,400 Americans died needlessly.
And you say that's
because of Obamacare.
And that's what they wanted.
People want to know why I go off my gourd about Obama and all these other dweebs that push this down the throat of the American public. You know, Greg, I have dedicated my entire life to helping people as a physician. My work and research has been on preventing people from getting injured. And then you have slime, globalist slime, like Obama and all these other dweebs around him that implemented this policy that killed Americans needlessly.
Which was the goal. You say was the goal.
It was the goal. I truly believe it was the goal. Because all you have to do is look at the architects of this, of these slime like Ezekiel Emanuel and his complete lives model.
So Obamacare is not going to it's done. Stick a fork in it.
That's exactly right.
They're not going to prevail in court.
And if we're going to thank somebody, rather than demagoguing this poor guy, Judge Reed O'Connor for having the guts to stand up to the globalist syndicate and say, you know what? No, enough of this on the American public.
Let's talk about the reset. We're long in the tooth here, but I'm not doing an interview for Wednesday, so you're it from Sunday to all the way next week. It's just really interesting stuff. I'm sorry I'm taking up a lot of your time. Bank of International Settlements floated a story. I'll just say that. That's my opinion. Floated a story to the Telegraph. Ambrose Evans Pritchard, real guy, good reporter. But, you know, it's just wondering why they were giving him quotes. Their BIS fears... I just wrote it out. Fears financial seizure at the heart of world's clearing system. That's the title for the UK, or for the Telegraph UK. Derivatives vulnerable to failure could cause destabilizing feedback loop. This is ended December 16th. BIS fears waterfall effect. In other words, the whole system seizing up. They're talking about the derivatives and how they're not going to perform, and they're going to hoard money in the banks. This was floated by the Bank of International Settlements, the central bank of central bankers. It's in Switzerland. What we have also coming up in Switzerland is the Economic Forum in Davos, and the 22nd and 25th. Trump is taking everybody in his cabinet. Or what is going on? Are they basically the Bank of International Settlements? Oh, and they said this is way worse. My conjecture here, 40%. It's way worse than 2008. That the debt's never going to be paid. This debt's never going to be paid. The derivatives are never going to perform. And what do you think they're going to be talking about? And why does Trump have such a big force going to Davos in the World Economic Forum in late to mid-January?
I believe this is the heart and the core of the war that has been ongoing between the nationalists led by Trump and the people he's associated with against the globalist syndicate that's been entrenched in power for at least well over 100 years, in my opinion. And I think that if you look at how President Trump ran in the 2016 election, he was talking about how the markets are in a bubble, the markets are a fraud, the unemployment numbers are a fraud, the government data is a fraud, and I believe he was correct on all those fronts. And then he gets elected, and he had this meeting, and you and I have talked about this before. He had this meeting in the Oval Office a couple days after he was elected, at an office in the West Wing of the White House, and then went for a photo op with Obama in the Oval Office. I believe Obama was at that meeting, and a number of other players I'm unaware of, but I understand there were a number of players in the room from a financial standpoint in the room. And I believe Trump walked into that meeting thinking we were $21 trillion in debt, and that he had worked out a potential plan in his mind or with his advisor's mind of how we could potentially get out of this mess. Because remember, he is the king of bankruptcy and how to get out of it, and how to actually come out better than when you walked in. And I do believe that's one of the reasons why he's there to be president at this time of our country's history. I believe our country is bankrupt. I believe if you talk to him separately in a room, he would probably say the same thing. I believe he had a plan. And part of that plan was possibly to devalue the dollar, to pay back the debt in more funny money, if you will, possibly to grow out of this, to reduce regulations, to try to bring production back into the United States, build up the economy, shore up the economy, because it's essentially not even on quicksand, it's on vapor. And possibly even, and you've mentioned this before in your shows, on how he suggested about Puerto Rico handle its debt, at least a portion of it, if not all of it, and that is to default, right? I think he had a plan. And I think at that meeting, I think his plan got blown out of the water because he was shown information, the great work from Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts on your platform that they presented on my platform as well. And that is that there's another $21 trillion just between 98 and 2015 in just the Department of Defense and Housing and Urban Development Department. I think that's only the tip of the iceberg. I think he was confronted with tens of trillions of dollars of other indebtedness our country has. And I think right then and there he realized, oh my goodness, we can't grow out of this. If we default, it's going to blow up not only our country and hundreds of millions of people, but the world. It's essentially like a nuclear device that's been implanted. The infrastructure remains, but everybody's blown apart like a neutron bomb, if you will. And this is why I think he looked so uneasy at that photo op in the Oval Office. I think it was November 10th or something. Because I think he was shown he was shown the numbers, and I think he decided, okay, number one, I got to stall for time, and this is why I believe he started taking ownership of the stock market, and I believe this is the reason why he brought known globalists into his administration: Gary Cohn, Steve Mnuchin, Wilbur Ross, a number of these players, because he essentially took them hostage and said, look, you're on the Titanic, we already hit the iceberg, only the people don't know about it yet, and you know what, you're not leaving this boat. Okay, and I'm holding you guys hostage, and I'm holding every entity that you're associated with hostage. And what we're going to do is we're going to buy time. We're going to buy time so that I can negotiate something with the creditors of our debt, so that when this thing comes down, and we know it's built to come down, we know it's just kind of like Building 7. It's rigged to implode. Um, we know this is how it's been rigged. The charge has already been set. So what I need to do is I need to buy time, and I need to make it so that when this occurs, hundreds of millions of people are not going to be devastated. And we have to make it so that the world doesn't blow up when this comes down. And you're going to help me do this. And you might not like it, but you're going to help me do it. And all the other clowns that you associate with in these globalist organizations, these Rothschild, Rockefeller, Axis parts of the financial world, they're also going to help whether they like it or not. And I believe what he's been doing over the past 2 years is he's utilized their magic wands, as Obama put it. He's been utilizing their magic wands like never before to blow this thing to the upside, if you will, to levitate it. And in the meantime, it's kind of like lifting a house up in the construction industry and then trying to slide some supports in underneath it to protect it as he's been holding this house that he has to move up to hold it there, and he's trying to slide in supports. And I also believe he's also been trying to educate the public of who the ultimate force that's led to this problem is. That's the Fed. Now remember, the Fed is one tentacle of the globalist syndicate. Many people believe they're the head of the snake. They aren't. If you want to start looking at financial institutions, you mentioned it, the Bank of International Settlements, BIS, in Bern, I believe it is, or the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Basel, I'm sorry, Basel. Yeah. So these are the entities that are the central banks, and they're all part of the syndicate. And I believe this is why we see, you had mentioned before about the Rothschilds acting up recently, yeah. right? And Rob Kirby presented a report to us that through his sources that the Rothschilds were selling a lot of their paper assets, right?
Yeah.
Over the past several months.
Wonder why.
But this is also why they're acting out, much like Brennan acting out, Hillary Clinton acting out with these hysterical tweets in the past, not since December 20th, but prior to that. It's because they're desperate, panic, cornered, and they're going down. And they know how to play offense, but they don't know how to play defense, and they lash out. And I believe that Trump is not just trying to take the Fed down and point the finger at the Fed, but what he's doing is he's also going at a higher level, BIS, IMF, and this is where we are. This is the war that we're in right now, and right now we have Trump. He actually put out recently, I'm contemplating firing the Fed chairman Powell,
which he can do.
Well, which he can do, actually, according to the chart of the Fed. But here's the thing, Greg. Here's the thing. Again, I think some of that is theater. I think what he's trying to do is point the public, because he knows the bought-off lamestream controlled globalist media are going to, look what he's talking about. He can't do that. But in doing that, in wafting those flames, the public is hearing, well, wait a minute, if Trump is saying he's going to fire the Fed, maybe the Fed's a problem. And then and Trump is out there, meanwhile, talking down China. China's trouble. China's criminals. They do all this illegal activity. And then he says the other day, well, my real problem is the Fed, not China. Okay? So what's happening is that the globalists, I believe, are trying to bring the system down. I think they're trying to bait Trump by raising interest rates. They're trying to bait Trump into firing Powell, into blowing up the Fed, and then because of that, the system crashes and everybody blames Trump. This is very similar to when you and I spoke about Khashoggi. We were some of the first people to talk about the fact that Khashoggi was really an operative of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yes.
And what they were trying to do is have Trump bite that apple and nail Saudi Arabia, and then Saudi Arabia's response would be to pull the petrodollar, which would blow up the financial system, and everybody would point to Trump. I believe they tried to bait Trump again with Powell and with him raising rates. He didn't take that. So here's the thing. Trump, I believe, knows the system is going to come down. He's trying to soften the impact of it coming down. Okay, and what he's doing is if he fires Powell, the system's going to come down and they're going to blame him. but he knows the system is going to come down, and he's trying to soften that blow. But he wants it so that when the system comes down, people are pointing the finger at the right direction, which is at the Fed and at the globalist syndicate and the BIS and the IMF.
And so he's going to go over there. I mean, he made a wonderful speech last year at Davos, and he's going to
have another. I think he's going to have another barn burner this year.
I think that he's going to basically mark his territory and put the blame where it belongs. I think with all this this massive immigration that they're trying to destroy everything. Now you got Merkel in your face. You have to give up your national sovereignty. I mean, what is that, Dave? They're now in your face.
Well, and again, this I believe is not coming from a position of strength.
The Davos thing.
Yeah, I think she's coming at it from a position of weakness.
And you think that he's there at Davos for what big reason? What business do you think, or do your sources think, is going to get done at Davos? I mean, we got to be getting close here, aren't we?
Now, you know what I think? I think this is going to be a reenactment of the George H.W. Bush funeral. I think they're going to be put on notice. I think he's going to drop, and it might be in private, but I bet you he's going to put some cookies out there for everybody in public, and he's going to drop some stuff, and it's good. And these world leaders, you watch how they watch. Don't listen to what they say. Watch how they react. I believe you're going to see at that Davos meeting some of these world leaders acting like Hillary when she opened her envelope, when the Bidens opened their envelope, when the Obamas opened their envelope, and how Jeb Bush acted and Laura Bush acted when they saw the note that was written. I think you're going to see a lot of, don't listen to what they say, those leaders, if you want to call them leaders, those criminals, watch how they act. And I think there's going to be a lot of wide-eyed zombification going on there after he's done with them.
They sold out their country.
He's showing up with a show of force.
They sold out their countries with Iran, just the Iran deal. They should all be in jail. Great Britain, Macron, Merkel, they sold out. They took bribes from Iran. This is according to a top advisor.
This shouldn't surprise anybody. Look at Merkel's background. Look at Macron's background. Macron was a banker for the Rothschilds.
Yeah.
I mean, so everybody's like, oh, well, look, he's bringing these globalists, Wilbur Ross with him and Steve Mnuchin. Well, that's one way to look at it. Here's the other way to look at it. He's bringing his hostages from the globalist state with him. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, see, they knew this was going to go down. They knew, but they thought Hillary would be in when this came down. They did not.
And she would not have put the supporting structures underneath the system because she was fine with the system coming down because that was the plan. And as the system came down, the more people that were harmed, the better. Because that's the globalist business model.
And she would have sold Alaska back to the Russians. She would have given up Hawaii, except for one island for Obama. I keep saying that. She would have let the Chinese move into the West Coast. She would have just Texas and New Mexico and California would be given to Hispanic people or the criminals, the drug cartels. The Hispanic people are fine. The cartels are terrible.
And it goes back to what we talked of earlier. What she did as Secretary of State, right? She weaponized Al-Qaeda. She weaponized ISIS. She led to their development.
She didn't care about her protection of her server because she didn't care about America.
Well, and again, the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, presented information at the hearing. Remember when Louis Gohmert asked him these questions, that at least 10,000 of her emails fell into foreign hands, including what was brought up at that hearing, China.
Yeah.
Okay, so to all those people that say, go back to how we started this, that Horowitz is part of the problem and he's a scam and he's cover and nothing. At that hearing, Horowitz brought out that at least 10,000 emails from Hillary's server were handed to another country, and that country being China.
People died over that.
And there are 18 intelligence agents associated with the United States that died because of that.
We had a doctor in Iran that got hung because his name went through her server.
Right.
He had an asset in Iran that got hung. Yes. So, I mean, The reset, the dollar reset. Are we going to get a reset in the dollar after? I don't think it's going to be before the Davos thing. There's business to be done in Davos. So
Yeah, you know what, Greg? When it comes to timing, here's the thing that this is where everybody gets messed up on. Is that go back to the declassification thing you and I talked, right? I was told that after the primaries, after the first week of September, the declassification thing was going to occur. Okay, and then after declassification, some, not all, some of the indictments would be unsealed, and then we'd see criminal cases brought and cases in front of military tribunals. Okay, September 17th, 10 days after the primaries were finished, Donald Trump came out and said, I want these entities declassified. And you and I have talked about that. FISA warrants of Carter Page, the 302 forms of Bruce Orr, fourth in command at the Department of Justice under Obama, and the third thing being the text messages between McCabe and emails and texts and emails between McCabe and Comey.
And this will show treason was done.
Well, it's going to show a number of things. The FISA warrants were going to show that Loretta Lynch approved the first one. It never went in front of the FISA court. The text messages could well show that there was some planning of violence against the president. And the 302 forms, I believe, of Bruce Orr will show that actually Bruce Orr was one of the writers of the fake Russian dossier. They all pin it on Steele, and Steele was involved in that, obviously, and actually recently testified in the London court that the reason why the dossier was created, this is him under oath in the London court, was to for Hillary to utilize in overturning the election. Okay. But the Orr thing is going to show that he was one of the writers.
The DOJ, the fourth highest guy.
Obama's DOJ, right? And that the White House, the West Wing of the White House, was involved in knowing that this was in true happening. In other words, involved in sedition. Okay, so Trump came out September 17th, said, "I want these declassified and I want it unredacted." And then what happened, and this is what ultimately I believe led to Sessions going, was that Sessions, and we've talked about this in previous interviews, Sessions slow-walked that declassification process. Because of that, he resigned. We now have Matt Whitaker, as the acting AG. Just this past week, it was determined that by two ethics boards, I believe, in the Department of Justice that reviewed all this, and Whitaker and his previous statements and all that stuff, that in fact he can oversee the Mueller investigation, and in fact, I believe has the jurisdiction to push through with the declassification. But understand something: Trump could do that today. Okay, he could do it today as the chief executive officer of the United States, as the president of the United States. He could say, "I want it." He said it on September 17th, and then they said, "Oh, let's slow walk this through." He could do it today, and the only reason why I believe it hasn't happened as of today is because he believes the timing is not right for it to happen. Okay, and there's only one person. You can wish it, I can wish it. Our sources can tell us, "Hey, this is going to happen." But as far as the exact date, there's only one person that can determine when that happens, and that's Donald Trump.
You think he's going to ultimately do it? He has to.
I do believe, because
his family dies.
Classification process, because I believe it opens Pandora's box. I believe it opens what really General Flynn was involved with. I believe it exonerates General Flynn, that entire declassification process. I believe it shows sedition and treasonous activities by the Obama administration, including Barack Obama himself. I believe it shows that the FBI director was involved in not only sedition, but actually in some nefarious activities, discussions about removing an existing president from office. I believe it's about the abuse by an attorney general, Loretta Lynch, of the FISA courts. I also believe it shows that the judges that didn't raise their hand and say, this is a problem, what's going on here, our courts being used, it also points the finger at them. So I believe there are a tremendous number of ramifications for this. But the only person who can determine, so he said it September 17th, and it still hasn't happened. And I believe the reason it hasn't happened isn't because so-and-so's wrong or so-and-so's sources are wrong. It's because the person who is the one person that makes that decision, Donald J. Trump, has decided it's not time yet.
And the people are going to go to jail over this, right? I mean,
Yes.
these people are going to get prosecuted, and they're going to confiscate assets. I mean, he put out these at least two executive orders that I know of, that December 21st, 2017, and another one about voting and about interfering in elections. They're going to confiscate assets.
Yes, and it's also my understanding that December 21st, 2017 executive order was again reissued recently.
So he intends to. That's a big component, having the Treasury come in and say, "Yeah, all your stuff, it's ours. You committed this act. We're taking your stuff." I mean, they're going to freeze bank accounts. They're going to take property.
It easily pays for the wall.
Well, that wall times 1,000.
And here's the other thing about the wall, right? The wall's being built.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody's saying, well, the wall's not happening, and it's not going to happen, and Ann Coulter, she went off the blah blah blah. Well, as I understand it, the Department of Homeland Security is overseeing a 20-mile piece of the wall, 30 feet tall, west of El Paso. It has a 6 feet deep concrete footings and 4 feet wide footings, so they can't tunnel underneath it. It's also my understanding that while the president was in the Oval Office over Christmas, waiting for the Democrats to come back with the $5 billion in funding, that he signed a contract for, I think, 115 miles more of the wall. Now, remember, we previously passed this funding bill for the military, who obviously can be involved with the Army Corps of Engineers in building the wall.
He's got discretionary funds.
My dad, when he was in the military, was part of the Army Corps of Engineers. And he said, yeah, we were building stuff all over the place, and all over the country. So I believe the Army Corps of Engineers is involved. We know the Department of Homeland Security is involved. He just signed a contract for 115 miles of the wall. So, what this whole government shutdown's about is, number one, it's a globalist nightmare. The government has been shut down now for a week.
He tweeted out,
and who's noticed?
And he's tweeted out that, hey, Democrats, the people that are not getting paid are people who voted for you. Now, 96% voted for, Hillary Clinton, the criminal, in Washington D.C.
Right, and the globalist played in his hands, because what he's showing is that the government shut down, and is anybody having any problems here? So the question is, what do these people do? And that's part of what he's trying to do here. And he's also trying to point the finger at the globalists, saying, look, this is, and remember, he has said human trafficking more in the past 2 weeks than he has. I mean, he's said it a lot over his presidency, but it's almost 24/7 when the wall's about human trafficking, about drug trafficking, and about keeping people safe, right? And he's been hammering that. And anyone who's against the wall is against those entities. And what's crazy
is for those entities.
The Schumers and the Pelosi.
Anybody who's against the wall is for human trafficking, for the drug cartels, for the people. They're for the evil and crime if you don't want a wall.
And what's crazy is the globalists think that they're winning this argument. And now we have a police officer who was a legal immigrant, I believe in California,
got murdered.
Just murdered by an illegal. An illegal.
Yeah. A shootout.
So his response is, look, I'm trying to prevent this. And these folks are telling me that it's okay.
Yeah.
So every day that goes by, the bought off lamestream fake media want to tell you that this is hurting Trump. That this is hurting the nationalist movement. This is hurting. I don't see it.
I don't either. The currency reset. We're going to get a currency reset, right? Are we going to get more gold and silver involved in this reset? A lot of people are saying, Jim Rickards, for one, a financial expert, says, the gold price is going to have to be about 10,000 an ounce. That's what's going to have to happen. We're going to have to revalue. Have you heard from your sources they have a plan B for the currency?
Well, what I've heard is that the only way to solidify the financial system is to tie the currency of a country to something fixed and something that has long-term value. And that's gold and silver. So I believe in order to fix the financial system that the globalists have destroyed,
Yeah.
there has to be a reset. And that reset has to be tied to something that has been seen as having physical value for, 5,000 years? And that's gold and silver.
You think they'll be talking about this at Davos at the Global Economic Forum, the 22nd through the 25th of January?
I think it was probably also discussed at the G20 meeting recently in Argentina. And I believe that it is a topic of discussion that is just not reserved for those large events, that it's an ongoing discussion that happens on a daily basis.
Would you go out on a limb and say this is the year the people that created all this treason and fraud, I mean, from the gun running to the Iran no signature deal fraud to the the criminality of the voter fraud? We haven't even talked about that. What about the voter fraud? When's that? What are we going to get? What are we going to get on that?
Well, what I was told about the 2018 voter fraud was that, and a lot of people disagree with me on this, and a lot of people send me nasty emails about this. I can only tell you what I've been told, and what I've been told is that there were significant voter, not only irregularities, but criminal acts, and that the 2018 election was used to catch these people, and that these people, some are in the process of being prosecuted. Some are being flipped to get up to people higher above them of where this all emanated from. But the ultimate goal of the 2018 election fraud that was caught is to utilize this to make sure and to ensure that the 2020 election is sound.
Wow.
Granted, there will be some type of voter irregularity in 2020, but not to the level it was in 2018 or the level it was in 2016. But I have not been told that there have been for example, folks say, well, we understand that all the 2016 election or 2018 election is going to be overturned. About all these events that happened in California and Orange County and the like. And frankly, I would be good with that, but that's not what I'm hearing.
And the last question, then we're going to wrap it up. This is a long interview, and there's not going to be any other interview, folks. This is it, so watch it all. You got on a limb and say 2019 is the year that the hammer of justice is going to fall on the globalists and the traitors who have been running America for not just in the last 8 years, but for the last, 25, 30, 40 years? Is the hammer of justice going to fall in 2019?
So the answer to that, I believe, is yes. And I believe it has to be, I believe if it doesn't, it will have meant that the globalists won. The system, the financial system, as we've discussed, is vapor. It's not even smoke and mirrors. And the system that's constructed of that nature cannot survive. And if we look at what's happening in the stock market, down 400, down 600, up 1,000, up 200, down 500. The other day it was down 600 points, and in 1 hour it went from down 600 to plus 200. That's not the vital signs of a stable financial system. That's the indication of a system that's breaking or is actually broken. And the system, the financial system, and I also believe if you call it the political system, is equally as dire shape. And I believe it's going to happen one way or the other. And it's going to happen, I think, sooner rather than later. That the system is either going to be held together, and there is going to be some fallout. It's not going to be a smooth ride, but hopefully the bumpy part of that ride is going to be several weeks, maybe several months, but not longer than that. And then we'll come out of this and we'll be in much better shape. But if we don't see things happening, I believe what it's gonna mean is the globalists were able to get back control. I think right now they don't have control. I think that they would be if things keep plodding along, that it means that the globalists have gotten control back of the Rothschild Rockefeller silo of globalists have gotten back control of the system. And I, I do think nobody wants to look forward to a surgical procedure. But in this case, I believe we're in the early process of going through a surgical procedure, and we need to cut out the cancer that's been there for well over 100 years in our country. And that can be a bit painful in the process. And this is why every person cannot sit back. They have to be actively involved. And if that actively involved means that they start their own YouTube channel, if it means that they are talking to their friends or just their family, if it means that they're trying to educate their coworkers or doing things around their community, this is all beneficial to having a system when we're done that people are better off. But people cannot just sit back, and they just can't be sitting back and complaining. They have to try to do what they can to educate as many people as possible as to what's really going on, and try to get people to move away from the bought-off lamestream fake media, because that's misinformation, disinformation, and actually trying to keep people completely in the dark because it makes them easier targets and victims of the globalist syndicate.
And you think the starting pistol, though, when you know that when it's going to really hit the fan, is when that declassification hits. You think that's step number one: declassify the criminality, the treason of the FISA courts and the documents used to spy on an incoming president and his team and his administration before and after he was elected. You think that the declassification is going to be the big starting pistol, and then we're off to the races?
Yeah, I think that the process has already begun, and I believe Trump fired that shot on September 17th, and it's a shot that has echoed but hasn't hit yet. And I believe once that declassification occurs, that's President Trump signaling, and the people behind him signaling, okay, all the pieces are in place, it's all set, now it's time to go.
And you think it's coming in 2019?
I don't think our country, I don't think the world can survive if it doesn't.
I'll take that. Dave Janda, your radio show Operation Freedom. It's on Sundays from 2 to 5. It's live streaming. You also have a premium channel because you still haven't been monetized. And your stuff's been stolen. I'm going to say this for you. Your stuff has been stolen on YouTube. They monetize your material, your copyrighted material. They monetize it, and you ask, hey, can I get monetized? Oh, well, no. You've been on for I don't know how long, and you still can't monetize, cannot get any revenue from the videos you produce to the public for free. But they told you can't monetize because other people are already doing it. It's already out there. This is why you have a premium channel that you can give people great content and also keep the lights on, right?
Right. As you know, Greg, it's expensive to, everybody thinks this is all for free, and for you to have a website with the IT infrastructure, with the hosting, with all the security, with my radio show, for the studio time, for the production time that I have to pay for, there are costs associated with that. And I, as an orthopedic surgeon, when I was working before I retired, I was covering those many thousands of dollars every month. I'm now retired, and I obviously could not afford to cover that. So I had a decision to make about a year ago, and that was to start a premium channel. So we have tremendous amount of free information at davejanda.com. The radio show is free. Folks can stream that. The YouTubes are free. As you said, I'm not monetized. We applied. We heard now we finally heard after 11 months we were not approved for monetization, and the reason is a number of channels have stolen my original content, have uploaded it on their channels that are already monetized. They're getting paid advertising revenue for my original content, of which I haven't approved, and now I'm not monetized because my original content is seen as being duplicate of my stolen content that's on those channels. Right? So, this is just another way of trying to starve out voices don't fit into the globalist business model. Now, so with our premium channel, we have extra shows. We have access to all of our, so the radio show is free, but the podcasts are on the premium channel, 24/7 availability. Our WTF show, which is a geopolitical analysis show, video show. Our interview show, of which you've been a valued guest in our interview show, Insider Insight show. We have our healthcare symposium series there, and our contributing editor section. That's part of our premium channel. That's 30 cents a day or $9 a month. Folks they don't have to sign up for a year. They can sign up for a month. If they don't like it, get rid of it, but not sure why they would, because again, the sources that I've developed over the past 30 years are very unique. I don't know anybody else who has that background of sources to present that information. But that's how I'm able to keep putting out the free YouTubes, because I'm not getting monetized there, and this is the only way we have to make ends meet. So again, we'd appreciate folks joining our Freedom family. I appreciate, Greg, everything that you do, not just with your show, but being a very good friend of mine, and always giving access to the information that we'd like to get out there to folks on a number of issues that I believe the fake media will never present.
Well, Dave Janda, I'm going to cut it off there. It's over 2 hours long. This is my interview for Wednesday. This is it. This is all inclusive. Listen, you all got lots of free information. Support Dave Janda, and at davejanda.com is Operation Freedom, Operation his premium channels. Dave, thanks for coming on and spending 2 hours and your sources and your brain and your medical expertise about Obamacare. Thank you, Dave Janda, for coming on usawatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you. You are an incredible freedom fighter, and I thank you for everything you do.